All right, now that we know the shape of molecules, we can finally take a look at molecule polarity. So remember, in order for a molecule to be polar, two things got to be true. One, it's got to have some polar bonds in it. And then two, they have to face approximately the same direction. So let's take a look at carbon dioxide and water. So first off, we'll ask ourselves, do they have polar bonds? And oxygen is more electronegative than carbon, so we do have polar bonds there. And oxygen is more electronegative than hydrogen as well, so we have polar bonds there. And then we want to go ahead and draw the Lewis structures for both of these in the correct shape. So carbon dioxide having two atoms, no lone pairs, is linear. And then water, two atoms, two lone pairs, it has a bent shape. After that, we can then draw our dipole arrows. Remember, the positive end towards the less electronegative and the negative end towards the more electronegative. So we have a dipole from the carbon oxygen there and from the carbon oxygen there. Whereas in the water, we have from the hydrogen to the oxygen there and there. So for the CO2, we can see that the dipoles face opposite directions. And so what that happens there is they cancel out. And so CO2 is nonpolar. Whereas with water, we can see they face approximately the same direction. They're both facing kind of upward. So these two would sum up and create a dipole. And so then water is polar. And then here's just electrostatic potential maps for these two. Right, there's CO2 on the left, water on the right. We can see that there's no net dipole here, so it's nonpolar, whereas water there is. We can see it's generally facing towards this upward direction. So make sure you're drawing molecules in the correct shape. For example, if you drew water like this, you might think it's nonpolar, but that's because it's not drawn in the correct shape. So when dipole arrows face away from each other, like we have up here in CO2, that's nonpolar. Also, if they're facing right at each other, that would also be nonpolar.